at the lateral view, this is looking at one side. Now when we look at the anterior view, we're going to be looking at both sides. Okay? You're not going to be able to see any detail on the lateral ventricles, but you're going to see everything else. And I'm also going to connect the meningeal system with the ventricular system, and hopefully it'll make some sense. Okay, let's label some stuff. So you'll see these a bunch. This right here is my representation. This is one thalamus. Together they're thalami. So this is your thalamus. Important nucleus for sensory relay. Okay. So what you couldn't see before is that third ventricle that I was talking about is actually seated between both of the thalami. Okay? It kind of looks like this. Okay. That's going to be your third ventricle. And your third ventricle had a couple of openings here to connect it to the lateral ventricle. Does anybody remember the name of those openings? Good. Foramen of Monro. All right. So, leading off the top, so the third ventricle is just here, like that. Okay. And the only thing you're going to see here with the lateral ventricle, it just looks like a little horn. So just coming off the third ventricle through the foramen of Monro, you're going to get a little horn. Okay. And come one on the right side and one on the left side. So you really can't see any of that detail that we talked about with the lateral view, but you can see that there are two now. You can see that there are two foramen of Monro, and here are this is your lateral ventricle. Okay. This is your third ventricle. Okay, coming off the third ventricle. I think I used, green. Coming off the third ventricle, going through the midbrain I talked about. There's a nice little channel. Okay, that channel, does anybody remember the name of that one? Great, that's your cerebral aqueduct. And that's a landmark I will use. Bless you. Cerebral aqueduct. Okay, coming off the cerebral aqueduct, located mostly in the pons, just a little bit in the medulla, you have your fourth ventricle. Now here, with this fourth ventricle, you're going to see the two foramen of Glushka connecting here with the outside. Remember I talked about the openings on the side. Two of them, they're lateral, and they're the foramen of Glushka. Here. Okay. And now I'm going to represent it going backward. So this is the one that's going backward from the fourth ventricle. The one in the middle is going to be, this is now your foramen of Magendie. Magendie for middle. M for middle, M for Magendie. Okay? And then this is the continuation from the fourth ventricle through the spinal cord. And this is going to be your central canal. Label this. This is your fourth ventricle. See where we are now? Now, the next thing I'd like to do is go ahead and add in our meningeal layers. Okay, very tightly adhere into the CNS. Here is our first meningeal layer, and that's going to be our, what matter is that? Pia, soft matter. There's going to be a little opening here for the foramen. Okay, so this is your pia mater, goes all the way around the outside. There's that hole there for foramen of Luschka here. And your pia mater goes all the way around the brain and brainstem and spinal cord, just like that. Okay, so nothing new. We've seen that before. The next layer up from the pia mater is arachnoid matter. Okay, so remember that arachnoid matter has got some space there. So we're going to have my arachnoid matter here with a little bit of that space. That's your subarachnoid space. Okay, and maintaining that subarachnoid space, you're going to have your trabeculae. We talked about those several times. Okay, so this orange has been consistent today. This is going to be your arachnoid matter. Putting everything together. And the last layer, we're gonna break it down. I started the talk saying that I called it generically dura matter. Okay, and we talked about that there's two layers of dura. Well, the meningeal dura is fully around the brain and spinal cord. Okay, and that's, remember, the meningeal dura is that one that makes the superior sagittal sinus there. Okay, so that's your meningeal dura, still there. And it's all the way, your meningeal dura is all the way around the brain and the spinal cord. So that's your meningeal dura. Okay. What I didn't tell you before is that the periosteal layer of dura mater is only around the brain. It does not go around the spinal cord. So, trying to make it simple. I mean, it is around the brainstem. I'm trying to make it so that you can see that. So it's definitely around the brainstem, but it is not around the spinal cord. Let's just put it around the outside. It's only around the brain, because it's tightly adhered to the skull. So it's tightly adhered, the periosteal dura is tightly adhered to the sutures of the skull, and it is not around the spinal cord. The difference between meningeal dura and periosteal dura.
Can you break down a little bit?
Sure, thank you. Okay. Now that, give you a chance to catch up. If you remember, that little invagination made by the meningeal dura forms this superior sagittal sinus. We talked about that previously, so I'll label that. Okay. That's your superior sagittal sinus up top. Nothing new. We saw it up close. We talked about it a bunch. Hopefully you're good with that. Now let's go ahead and, does anyone know what makes cerebral spinal fluid or CSF? Those are something called your choroid plexus. And your choroid plexus are going to be in all of your ventricles. So I will represent the choroid plexus as kind of like a little stalk of broccoli here. Put one in this lateral ventricle. I'll put one in your third ventricle. Put one over here in this lateral ventricle. In reality, they're a specialized kind of ependymal cell. We'll talk about that in a couple of classes, exactly what that is. But they exist in all of your ventricles, and it's kind of like a group of cells that are responsible for making CSF. So I will put that here. So these are called your choroid, C-H-O-R-O-I-D, plexus, P-L-E-X-U-S, choroid plexus. And the main job in life for the choroid plexus is to make CSF, or cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, and you can see that once the CSF is made here in all of these ventricles, CSF is just a fluid. It's acellular. It has it shouldn't have any bacteria in it or anything like that. It just creates a stable ionic environment. We'll talk about that for the CNS in general. And it fills these lateral ventricles with this cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, and you can see that the CSF fluid actually can drain through both the foramen of Luschka and the foramen of Magendie directly into that subarachnoid space. Okay, so that's how the fluid, the CSF, gets into the subarachnoid space. Okay, once it gets into the subarachnoid space, it fills the entire thing up and actually drains into the superior sagittal sinus. So that CSF is continually being replaced. Okay. When it drains into the superior sagittal sinus through a little structure, so coming out of the superior sagittal sinus, or coming out of the subarachnoid space, entering the superior sagittal sinus, is something known as an arachnoid villus. Arachnoid villus is nothing more than something that drains the CSF from the subarachnoid space. So that's your arachnoid villus, V-I-L-L-I-S. Villus is plural, villus is one. And it drains CSF into the superior sagittal sinus. So now you know that the CSF is made in the choroid plexus. It fills all the ventricles, is drained into the subarachnoid space via the foramen of Luschka and the foramen of Magendie, and it's drained from the subarachnoid space into the superior sagittal sinus by something known as the arachnoid villus. And like I said, CSF is continually being produced and drained to the superior sagittal sinus. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is just CSF functions. So CSF function. Okay, just 4 of them that I'd like to list. So the first is going to be buoyancy. And that gives a nice buoyancy to the CNS. Because the brain is floating around in that cerebral spinal fluid. It also adds a layer of protection. Okay. It helps to protect the CNS. It's also involved in the removal of metabolites. From the CNS. And lastly, I mentioned this earlier, it provides a stable ionic environment for the CNS. Okay, those are the most important things you need to know. Yes, Sid.
What's the word on number 3?
Removal of metabolites from the CNS. Yeah, metabolites. Yes, Ben.
What is a metabolite?
Metabolic. Can't use the word metabolite. It's a byproduct of a cellular process. How's that? A byproduct of a biochemical cellular process. Right? I would say byproduct of metabolism, but metabolism is metabolism.
No, that works.
Yes. So I got one in the back. Is that Felicia?
Yes. Can you explain the arachnoid again?
Yeah, sure. The arachnoid villus is nothing more than a represented. I have one here shown in the picture, but in reality, they're kind of like the bridging veins. They go from the subarachnoid space, and they're specialized structures that emerge out of the subarachnoid space into the superior sagittal sinus.
So there's a bridge.
It's kind of like a bridge, and their job is to help drain the CSF. They drain the CSF from the subarachnoid.
Yeah, I need to take it.
And again, they're all over. Yes. Drain from the and just put it into the general.
I felt your salad. Sinuses all come together as venous blood and ultimately drains so you're just returning the CSF, which is largely water, back into the circulation.
Your bad influence.
So the choroid plexus is always making CSF from the blood, from the plasma, and you're ultimately just returning that water back.
Yeah, I know it goes back into the circulation, but I didn't know how it got there. Thank you, Dr. Blair. Okay, any other questions about this? No, so this is kind of important. Oh, I'm sorry, Alex, you had a question. I missed you.
The protection was just physical. It doesn't help fight against like infection or disease or anything like that.
Nope. Nope. It actually. So if you get, I didn't talk about the lumbar puncture or anything like that. That's not as important for a PT. But if you have an infection, that it can be present in your CSF, and they can do something called a lumbar puncture to detect the presence of infection in the CSF. Okay. Okay, let's look up. Do you have another question, Felicia?
No.
Oh, just playing with your hair. Okay, now this is